Module 1.2, our environments. Week 2, Thinking Lecture 1.2, Animal Perception, Animal Cognition, Individuality, Meditation, and the Eternal Present. Evolutionary psychology informs and reminds us that we are not alone as thinking beings, not just in the universe, according to the Drake equation, which deals with probability, but here on the Earth, where it's a matter of fact and not speculation that there are minds in the waters and minds in the trees and on the savannas. Highly intelligent thinking animals, although in the process of going extinct because of our habitat changes and pollutants, still exist all over this planet, and we must talk about them in order to harness our hubris and protect from solipsistic arrogance and anthropomorphism. Fundamentalist Islam and Christianity have worked hard to reduce our field of perception to include only Homo sapiens and have succeeded in using anthropocentrism to destroy our ecosystems and life support systems. Sustainability without including other members of God's creation, though, is untenable. Award-winning science fiction author David Brin has been tackling the idea of narrowing the gap between human cognition and animal cognition through his famous Uplift series of futuristic novels, in which it is the duty of the first sentient life form on any given planet to help the other large brain creatures there develop their own consciousness and intelligence. Apes, cetaceans, and elephants become the most obvious candidates on our Earth Sea, given their brain mass to body ratio and behavioral repertoires, and so they are the beings featured in his Uplift novels. Now recently, Brin has been musing on what is missing when it comes to developing one's intelligence, and in his recent blog, he has mused that perhaps the chief barrier to evolving and maintaining a strong intelligence is the lack of media to store memories outside the brain. He cites the work of philosophy and economics professor Don Ross of College Cork, who, quote, suggests that the biggest obstacle to effective sapience on the part of elephants, corvids, and toothed whales might be their ability to store information outside themselves. To build upon a lifetime of experience, say in a herd matriarch or some of our cave ancestors, in a critically expanding and accumulating way. We began doing this by extending human lifespans so elders might carry oral traditions even into their 60s. Then came writing and so on. He says, this leads to an intriguing possibility that uplift of the smartest animal, pre-sapient species, might begin not with genetic meddling, but by simply offering sites for external memory storage. Say obelisks perched along an elephant migratory path or in some shallow dolphin-friendly bay that record and play back correlated inputs from any who come to purposely engage. If our deep learning algorithms can crack the elephant communication code, he says, and enable us to engage in conversation with them, perhaps we could create this means of storage such that elephants are motivated to attend to it, end quote. Don Ross's suggestion that, quote, elephants might have the necessary capacities for personhood, we just need to help them acquire the cognitive scaffolding, is intriguing because it offers an empirical strategy for enhancing cognitive ability and shows why thinking in and of itself is so inadequate without some media for recording those thoughts, and why thinking out loud in some form is so necessary. Ross writes, quote, I don't think that elephants currently express the full range of personal and creative capacities that humans do, but I suspect all that's missing are certain informational and institutional structures along with the motivations to innovate upon them. In humans, we know what those structures look like. They are the books, movies, museums, and laws that manifest in the world what otherwise exists only in our heads. It might be that there's a lot going on in the heads of elephants, but they just haven't been moved to externalize and store it in the environment the way we have. However, he says, if elephants do have all the raw material, the raw mental material it takes to be persons, a time could come in the near future when we might draw them into a more expansive kind of personhood. The behavioral economics experiments that a colleague and I are planning to run with a group of semi-wild female elephants in South Africa should begin to test the plausibility of this arresting speculation, end quote. In his classic book, Animal Minds, Beyond Cognition to Consciousness, Don Griffin echoes Darwin's observation that the difference between man and the other animals is one of degree and not kind. Biological anthropology, particularly the work of Jane Goodall, among others, has shown that our closest primate relatives make tools, think with intention, and communicate to cooperate. What do you think really separates us from our non-human fellows on Earth? Wilson on page 20 reminds us that, quote, although highly intelligent in at least one aspect, chimps score far below humans in others. They live in the here and now. They cannot plan their actions for even the next day. Whereas humans can construct scenarios thousands of years into the future and millions of miles into space. When supplied with paint and brush, chimps can draw pictures, but not as well as humans of any age beyond infancy. For example, chimps can spontaneously draw the outline of a face, but not the details within it, a feat any young human child performs effortlessly. Chimpanzees also fall short in the ability to cooperate or act altruistically. He quotes Duke University neuroscientists Hare and Tan, who say, quote, we suspect that it is not a tendency to act altruistically that makes humans unique. Instead, it seems more likely that our species is unusually cooperative because of our flexible ability to avoid high-cost helping, that is, harmful to reproductive success, while recognizing the benefit of mutualistic endeavors, end quote. And Wilson summarizes, quote, the ancestors of our species developed the brain power to connect with other minds and to conceive unlimited time, distance, and potential outcomes. This infinite reach of imagination, put quite simply, is what made us great. Page 21. What I find fascinating about the elephant memory storage hypothesis of Ross is that we are in a unique position today to uplift and extend whatever latent imaginative capacity other large-brained animals may already have by giving them add-ons external to their own central processing units that mimic the function of those internal structures that we possess that made us so great. With the strength of the modular computer and cloud storage metaphors that we now see working so powerfully in our own lives, applied to other organisms, we may actually stumble into an even deeper understanding of the connectedness of all life and the capacities for higher order thinking that can come from coordinated collective intelligence. Now, I remember as an undergrad at Harvard studying biological anthropology and cybernetics and taking evolutionary biology with Professor E.O. Wilson in person, how his lens on the world stimulated powerful insights into the nature of cognition. It was his class that motivated me to study marine mammal intelligence and communication and led to my senior thesis with Dr. Terry Deacon on what we believe to be the world's first and only talking harbor seal, a male of the species Phoca named Hoover, who was living at the New England Aquarium, who startled visitors with his regular vocalizations that clearly included the words and phrases, hey, Hoover, hey, hello there, hey, get out of here. Terry Deacon's book describes our research. The book is called The Symbolic Species, the Coevolution of Language in the Brain, and points out how, when Hoover eventually died, analysis of his brain showed distinct abnormalities in the sections of the brain that are associated with human speech. The hit-and-miss nature of evolution by natural selection has been known to accidentally and suddenly produce structures that make what biologists call hopeful monsters, sudden saltations of evolutionary leaps due to rather large mutations that are favorable and give enhanced capabilities. But these are rare, and most mutations are deleterious, and so evolution generally proceeds very slowly. But Ross's idea suggests another approach to enhancing cognition and capability, and it's one that was also featured in the Pixar Disney feature Up. In that movie, remember, the evil villain in the dirigible in the sky has outfitted his pack of attack dogs with translation collars that turn their thoughts and growls and barks into intelligible human speech and vice versa, expanding the range of communication possibilities. Recently, a contestant on Shark Tank tried to market a similar idea. And while the reality isn't quite there yet to be a game changer worth investing in, the idea is intriguing. Certainly the use of semiotic principles in cybernetics to digitally enhance animal thinking so that they can more easily connect with other minds and possibly conceive unlimited time, distance, and potential outcomes is realistic. If only because any mimicking of the human mind's internal structures by external equipment that amplifies in the non-human what our mutated brain structures did for the early hominid's mind leading to our intelligence should have the same effect, regardless of where the amplification takes place. Helping other animals to think out loud in ways that go beyond the limited vocabulary of barks and whistles and growls that lock them into an eternal present, and then to think out louder in ways that go beyond the limitations of nest building and simple tool creation to the creation of enduring cultural artifacts, is considered by David Brin to be an obligation of those who the casino lottery nature of evolution put there first. But you need to ground your thinking in evolutionary theory and in the agnostic nature of nature, which could care less if the structures and processing systems are organic or inorganic, and merely preserves that which works when fitness and adaptation are on the table. Recently, a speech-language pathologist demonstrated with her 18-month-old dog that by providing a dog paw-activated computer interface, the canine has been able to learn and express 29 words and can combine up to 5 words to make a phrase or sentence. The way she uses words to communicate and the words she's combining is really similar to a 2-year-old child, says Hunger, who documents Stella's progress, the dog, on her blog, Hunger for Words, and Instagram. Could it be that what has really been missing all along is simply the right technology? Stating a need for a wider sharing of high cognition with other animals may offend some self-avowed animal rights activists and environmentalists who've generally long held human beings' special thinking capabilities in contempt or with suspicion, blaming the tree of the knowledge of good and evil for our original sin, and romanticizing the lives of organisms that don't seem to be burdened by traumas of the past or fears of the future. But I personally find this naive and even dangerous, since sustainability will not be achieved without the participation of the majority of life forms cooperating. And in the Anthropocene, we've seen the systematic destruction of almost every organism we have not found it easy to cooperate with. Those who fear the Frankenstein syndrome may create or enjoy watching films like Deep Blue, where transgenic sharks endowed with higher intelligence and a new cooperative spirit that only seems to apply to other fish take revenge on humanity. This is also the subject of German speculative fiction author Frank Schatzing's international bestseller Der Schwarm, and they derive cautionary life lessons from it. The Planet of the Apes series depicts all the things that can go wrong even if the animals newly endowed with high intelligence and cooperative capabilities want peace with humanity. Nonetheless, legions of children in the Disney era have grown up with what my uncle, Disney animator Seamus Cullhane, called talking animals and other people in his book by the same name, and found delight in envisioning a world where we can all communicate meaningfully and cooperate thereby. The Pixar Disney film Zootopia takes the hopeful scenario to its logical conclusion, audio-visually describing a world in which predators and prey have come to an understanding and taken an oath of non-violence, which only gets disrupted when an evil scientist tries to hijack the newly evolved neocortical systems that allow predatory instincts to be suppressed. But as the movie points out, this modern telling of the biblical prophecy of a time when the lion will lie with the lamb in a true Zootopia suggests that science and technology can, in fact, make it achievable, and any problems will remain technical if the moral imperative is generally understood and is gotten right. The satirical sci-fi movie Carnage, 2011, tackles these themes from the perspective of a future vegan civilization that cannot even conceive of how our current and past generations lived with the horror and shame of murdering innocent animals, and draws a path from today to then, showing how sustainability can be imagined through a repudiation of slaughter and carnivory in general. It is compelling, but may be harder to achieve than the filmmakers suggest, as long as other animals can't speak for themselves. Although the history of slavery and genocides and other human brutalities suggests that even with the ability to communicate, the path to liberty and justice is much harder to follow than optimists would hope. Still, there is something to be said for experiments and interventions that increase the number of dimensions across which interspecies communication and cooperation can occur, since today, as in the past, there are very few St. Francis of Assisi types, very few Jains, members of an Eastern religion that eschews killing any living being, very few horse whisperers and dog whisperers, and persistently a minority of vegans and vegetarians. It is, I feel, always a useful exercise for humans to try and go the other direction, to try to devolve consciousness, to become animal whisperers, to meditate and let go of the burdens of higher terrestrial cognition so as to achieve a possible even higher extraterrestrial cognition or loving God consciousness. There are many who return from such spiritual journeys speaking of encounters with Hebs, HEBs, or highly evolved beings. And it may well be that thinking the way humans do it is as overrated as it is misunderstood. Some would claim that our form of cognition may ultimately be maladaptive, an evolutionary dead end, an evolutionary experiment that will lead to our extinction. Others, like French priest and philosopher Teilhard de Chardin, claim that we and our thinking capacities are not ours alone at all, but that we are part of an ever-evolving noospheric consciousness that is created by the interaction of minds in the biosphere with the biochemical processes of the lithosphere, hydrosphere, and atmosphere. This spiritual interpretation gets some scientific support, in fact, from the Gaia theory of Dr. James Lovelock, that posits the idea that there are nested levels of consciousness which, in sum total, can create the emergent property of a collective intelligence that is planetary in scale. And if one assumes the currently popular idea of a holographic universe, consciousness could level up and out to the universal scale. We may never know. But the interesting thing about the 21st century is that we are beginning to play God by applying the math that we have been developing all these millennia with the artificial intelligence deriving from the digital hardware and software we developed to process that math. And through the insights gained using these technologies, like the deep thought computer developed at Carnegie Mellon University in 1988 to beat humans at chess, on its way to becoming the deep thought computer of Douglas Adams' satirical Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, modeling how various animals may think and how we think, and in the process, getting a better feel for what thinking in general is really all about. Without an evolutionary perspective, we can't really make sense of our planetary boundaries. Our universe appears to be infinite and expanding, and yet we face limitations as organisms evolving biochemically on a planet. The humanities, says Wilson, handles everything conceivable, including things that are impossible. The sciences handle everything possible, even things not yet conceivable. But only by contextualizing our thoughts through evolutionary psychology can we push the limits of what is conceivable to embrace all things possible for making a better world, even for understanding what the word better really means in an evolutionary context. Fitness, adaptiveness, and be able to deal with what must remain in the realm of pure fantasy without disappointment or conflict. Only in this way can we not only evolve our thoughts, but evolve our society so that the best of our animal and human natures can sustain.